to you all from, I know you're joining, there's a lot of people joining us from, across the continent and the globe. And if you've just tuned in, this is day one of the 2022 Annual Leaders Gathering. It also coincides with the 10-year anniversary of the LéO Africa Institute. And, as I'm reflecting on 10 years, I've only been with the Institute since 2018, a quote comes to mind, which is, "Until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter." And in, more ways than one, I think a lot of the panelists have touched on this in their own way. And, for me, what it means is, for the longest time, we've never had platforms as Africans. We've been invited to attend events such as the World Economic Forum at Davos, and what that has meant is that Africa has been on the receiving end, which means often we're at the sidelines of those conversations. It also means that we are not in the driving seat of what the agenda is. And why I'm really excited about this 10-year milestone is that what LéO Africa Institute is doing is it's actually turning that narrative on its head, in that the lion has finally learned how to write. This is an authentic African platform where young and emerging leaders come together and we're able to share African ideas, African solutions for African problems by Africans. And I think that should definitely be applauded. Now, this session is a leadership conversation with Magnus Mchunguzi.
Hey, is it my side or is it Kabwe's?
I think Nkatya has frozen a bit. Let's just give him a minute to come back.
Gentlemen, as Awal mentioned, my name is Nkatya Kabwe. I am from the YELP class. I'm a fellow from the YELP class of 2018. And I'm really just excited that even though I'm not able to join...
Nkatya, can I just maybe interrupt you? You froze on for a bit when you're introducing Magnus, so you may want to go back to that bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's much clearer now.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, so I'll just go back to the top. As I mentioned, the session is a leadership conversation with Magnus Mchunguzi, and it's themed Investing in Bold African Ideas, how the story of the LéO Africa Institute can inspire action. You can look forward to Magnus sharing his unique insights on the opportunities and challenges of moving this from ideation to building an enterprise in Africa, but also why he was drawn to investing in the bold African idea that has become the LéO Africa Institute that we all know and love, really. As Awal mentioned, my name is Nkatya Kabwe. I'm a fellow from the YELP class of 2018. And I'm really excited that even though I can't join you physically, I'm able to join this conversation virtually. And this is all made possible by technology. And I'm coming to you live from Lusaka, Zambia. Now, someone I know who's equally as excited about technology and telecommunications is our panelist, our special panelist, Magnus. Magnus is a co-founder of the LéO Africa Institute and is an experienced executive director with a demonstrated history of working in the telecoms industry. Magnus is currently executive director of the Kwanza Group. I look forward to him explaining, what exactly they do at the Kwanza Group. But prior to this, Magnus also served as vice president and managing director of Ericsson South Africa. As vice president, he was responsible for governing commercial undertakings across sub-Saharan Africa, ensuring the company secures profitable business. But also as managing director, he was responsible for providing the company's strategic business direction in the telecom sector in South Africa. He's a strong business development professional with a BSc focused in computer science from the University of Reading. Magnus is also a fellow of the Africa Leadership Initiative East Africa and a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. On that note, I'd like to invite you and welcome you, Magnus. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone who is on the call. First of all, my apologies. I'm speaking today from Lausanne, Switzerland. I've been here for my leadership development program, which I think was extremely very valuable. I think we all need once in a while to figure out who we are, dig deep. So I think the lessons learned were extremely valuable. So we finished yesterday, and in about 1 or 2 hours, I'll be off to the airport to fly back home. But anyway, I told, a few months ago when we had a call that I'll try and see how I can juggle, but everything just seemed to land at the same time. The 10th anniversary and this training, which was already booked and paid for almost 8 months ago. So all just kind of stayed in that holding pattern. But anyway, just to speak a little bit about myself, I'm from Tanzania, a proud Tanzanian. So those who speak Swahili will be happy, but I'm also extremely proud African. And most of the time I start by telling people I'm an African, and then I never say what, and people keep on narrowing me down. Where are you from? Where are you from? And I have to always tell people that I just feel African, and I feel African for a particular reason, because one, I feel that it's the only place in the world whereby every country I go, I don't really look different from anybody, and I feel I don't really worry about the borders. I always feel that I should be able to straddle and go. So it's the only place I go, whether I'm in Nigeria, I'm in Guinea, I'm in Cameroon, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, whatever, and Zambia, where I go a lot. I've been doing a lot of business in Zambia. So Kabwe, you would know that I know quite a lot of your people, from the president and his lieutenant. So I'm always in Zambia also. And I was also and the former president, Rupia Banda, was a personal friend. So I was also at his funeral. But Africa is my home. And I always feel that we were dealt a very bad end of the stick. So, but I think we need to imbue the fact that we need to call ourselves Africans first before we call ourselves for nationalities, because some of these nationalities were just handed over to us. I mean, if you look, if you take a small history of Zambia, Zambia was Northern Rhodesia, you had Southern, Northern, and then Nyanzaland. So Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Zambia were one country. So if you go to Zimbabwe, you find a lot of Malawians. I mean, you can look, you see the Tembos and the Bandas. You might not think you are in Zimbabwe, you're in Malawi. The current president of Zimbabwe, Mnangagwa, was born in Zambia. Former president of Zambia, Rupia Banda, was born in Zimbabwe. So, and then if you go deep down, the claim of Robert Mugabe was Malawian. So if you go around, you find that it's very hard to say who's really African in terms of country, but you can say you are African, and I think it would work. I'm from Bukoba. To some extent, people think we are supposed to be Ugandans because we are more closer to the Nyankole people than we are to the Skuma people next door. So there's all this confusion and contradictions. And so I think we have to be extremely proud to be African. So I'm proud African, proud Tanzanian, proud everything. But I really love being a Black man and an African. I've got 2 kids, 25 and 26. I live in Johannesburg, and for the greater part of my life, I spent it in telecom. So I'm an engineer, and I think the one thing I could say quite greatly, I touched on a lot of our people by at least enabling communications in all the major countries in Africa. So that also connected me to the people. And one thing that I recall when I was growing up, which I felt was very profound, that until mobile telephony came, the only thing that really got Black people or Africans excited and connected were only when the World Cup came around. So when the World Cup came around, we all suddenly realized we are a continent. We all would pitch in to support first our African countries, which at the end of the day never reached very far. Then suddenly we'll default to countries with a lot of Black population, maybe to be Brazil and some other European countries. And so that was the only thing that connected us. Telephony is the only thing that broke a lot of the barriers, because the first time that we could now get people from different parts of Africa working together. So you found Nigerians working in East Africa, Kenyans working in South Africa, and all over. You know, Uganda's here, Tanzania there. So and it has enabled us to communicate and connect. And it has kind of removed a lot of barriers. Even if you look at the African trade, it's going up. So I feel proud to have been part of that moving journey that enabled us to really build the connectivity. We are still very far from doing a lot together. I would love to see that There are no visas, to travel from one African country to the other. Today, if I want to come to Europe, I just wake up and pack my bags and leave that day. If I want to go to US, I wake up and go on a flight. If I want to go to Asia, I wake up and get on a flight. If I want to go to Africa, then the mess starts. I need to figure out which country am I going to? Do I have the visa? How long will it take? Will they allow me in? What will they require me to get in? So we're kind of have a mental blockage against ourselves. So we need to remove those things that stop our Black people from traveling around. So overall, then in 2015, I asked myself a very important question, whether I would want to continue working for a corporate. I had all the titles, worked in many countries, and I was, destined to be moved to another. I was supposed to move to the Middle East, to head the Middle East, or to go to Asia. And then I felt that the only thing I would leave for my kids would be that the father had a very big title, to put that into perspective, my daughter, when I left corporate, I took my placard, my name tag, the thing they hang on your door, Magnus and the title. So my daughter hangs it in our room, so now I always remember that. Imagine if I'd kept staying there, that would be the only thing my daughter would be proud of. That worked, and that's his title. And the rest of the thing is just what she reads on Google and the internet. So I decided it was important for me to start building something that I take my experience and build business. So in 2015, and prior to that with my friends, I come from a business family. We had started to build, so we built quite a beautiful business. I'm very proud of what we've done. So today I'm in payment, so I do fintech. One of the business that I built is now, we've now launched in Tanzania. We've launched in Kenya. We got our PSP license 2 days ago, but we're ready to go to fire, and we're almost ready to fire in Uganda. And then after that, we were in, last week, my team was in Zambia with Zanako. They had a great meeting. Also, we were at the FinTech Summit. We met a lot of people from Zambia, so we kind of moved quite well, and then we're going to wave across Africa. Then I've got another one that provides core banking solutions, which also is really, we are working with Africa, the PAPS, the Africa Payment Solution, whereby we hope to then create that linkages where traders in Africa, I don't know if you're aware of the new payment platform of Africa, which is Afrexim is championing, and all the central banks of Africa are connected to it. So our role is to allow the merchants, the people who want to trade in Africa, to intermediate. So you go online, you want to buy something from Zambia and you're sitting in Uganda, you put your name, you want to buy some lovely coffee from Uganda, and then you pay in Zambian kwacha. The guy in Uganda gets Zambia, shillings, Uganda shillings, and there's no dollar involvement. And all the documents for trade are offered. So basically, that's the thing that I'm working on. And then I've got, I've got value-added service platforms and many other things. So that's me. Good to be here, and congratulations. All, I think I need to give you the greatest congratulations for when we start talking about LéO Africa. I remember in our tail end of our LéO Africa Institute graduation, what do you call it, the early institute graduation seminar, and you said, Magnus, everybody seems to talk about something else. I want to help African have a platform to communicate and hear their views. And I thought, wow, it sounded very noble. And I was thinking, it takes a great man to pull it off, yeah? And then at that time, you had a very close relationship to President Kagame. You had a very close relationship with President Museveni, and also the different role players, and you went about to start putting it together. And I was inspired to see that you are not speaking just from a naivety, but you're speaking from a person who believed in what's possible. So that in itself, I loved and appreciated. So let me hand over to you. Yeah. And let me pass on to you, Mr. Kabwe, to take us forward.
Thank you, Magnus. Thank you for that insightful introduction. And apart from you being African and Tanzanian, it's clear that we can also claim you as Zambians. You're clearly Zambian as well. So I look forward to seeing you the next time.
Yeah, we
know where you shine.
All
right. Great. Now, Magnus, speaking of, you've touched quite briefly on, the initial conversation with Owl and how you were moved by his vision to create a platform, an authentic platform for young Africans to be able to foster and build a network of, value-based leadership within the continent. So I'm curious to take you back. You're actually attending a leadership fellowship or training in Switzerland. You and Owl met at a leadership fellowship about over 10 years ago, and had the first conversation around then. So I'm curious if you could take us back as you reflect to that conversation. What was it about the idea that made you think, okay, I'm in, and two, I'm actually going to invest in this idea and put some money where my mouth is, which I hear was around, $45,000 over a 2-year period. So what is it that made you, when you heard that idea, say, okay, I'm in?
I think that when you're still very young, you always trying to figure out. First of all, we felt at the time that we were among the selected few, if you want to call it that way. It was like a melting pot of all of us from East Africa. We felt that we were at the right age, and we're in that period where you're transiting from just purely thinking about yourself, but then you have to reflect what's your role in this world, and what does it mean to be a leader in your community and on the continent. And everybody had a lot of ideas. I listened to many people's ideas. Some pitched about investment. Some felt that the route to success was investment. Some pitched about being a political, we create a political movement, and the debate was, so what do we do? Do we use the early vehicle? But we read the charter, it says you cannot choose the vehicle for political means, but then how do you then articulate your collective vision? So we went through so many things, but also we realized that the journey that we had been on of the early East Africa and the Aspen Institute, the greatest part was understanding how the world was formulated. How did the world come to that? We went through Aristotle, we went through the different evolutions, and we felt that maybe the only way to prepare people is through really providing a platform and preparing young leaders so that when they know where to start, if we're given the right tools from the beginning, then it means that we will enhance more people in the future to help Africa even take a bigger leap. So I felt the idea was noble. It sounded extremely big, because you have to now start figuring out will you step on political people? What will people see it as? So there are a lot of things that we thought, but for me, the idea that we can help build African and young ones sounded like a noble idea, and I was really proud that I had a young man who just seemed to be certain about what he wanted to do, and I felt that it was great to back up the vision. And also have to mention that we had our other brother, Richard Mugisha, very noble lawyer, who also kind of at the tail end came in and also helped. I think we had our dear sister Rosette. We had some of our members who also kind of liked the concept and idea, and they were willing to chip in ideas and thoughts and directions. So for me, it was purely to think. I felt that the whole idea of helping and providing a platform for young people was a great idea. And that would enhance more value for the continent than purely people making money.
Fantastic. 10 years on, Magnus, has the Institute lived up to the original intention you had? And if so, what are some of the milestones that you're most excited, or specific areas that you're most excited about in terms of the impact you've had over the last 10 years?
I think for me, they always, let me use a business analogy. They always say that in business, they tell you today that if anything survives more than 3 years and then reaches 5 years, then it's got legs. If it does 10 years, it's an institution. Then after that, it's just a matter of it to move forward. So I think whatever the ups and downs we've gone through, but it's having you on the call, having everyone taking part, it really tells you that the institution alone has done well. And you can look at the number of young fellows that have come through the program. The reach, you're now sitting in Zambia, the Tanzanian chapter, Zambia, Uganda, and many other places. So you can see that we have broadened beyond from just when it started was Uganda, then we did a number of pitch in Rwanda, but it's now just expanding. Maybe my dream for the next 10 years would be, we have the LéO Africa chapter across Africa. I know there's a chapter somewhere in Canada, but imagine if soon we cover the whole continent, and then it becomes one of those de facto. So I think we have created the right steps, left the right marks on the ground. We now need to create bigger, we're now used to the elephant steps now to move forward.
Magnus, you touched on, which was going to be a question I had for later, but I think you've touched on it now around your dream for the next 10 years and being in every African country. Nicholas mentioned something in the panel discussion earlier, which was that leadership in contemporary times requires new approaches. When the LéO Africa Institute, set up 10 years ago, we didn't have rampant pandemics, COVID-19. Now we have, Ebola. Unemployment is at an all-time high. Climate change is also, we're facing challenges with climate change, and then the food basket, all of that. But then on the back of this, we also have technology, which is, as being in the business you're in, is driving the way financial services are, delivered and accessed, but also is driving, how health is accessed, and has changed or turned on its head the way the future of work and how we look at work, right now. So I'm curious to know, apart from being in like 10 in all African countries and having a chapter across the continent, do you believe that, the initial vision is still relevant today as it was given the times we live in, or should we adapt?
First of all, let me say that the idea of preparing young men and women for the future, I think it's a thing that lives forever. It doesn't matter whether there's a pandemic, there's what. I think that preparing people well for the world they will enter, it will mean that they'll face the world in a much better, it's like going to war. If you don't train for the war, you are most likely to lose when the first gun goes off. But if you are at least at the basis of how to defend, how to attack, how to think strategically, then whatever comes in front of you, you adapt according to the tools that you already have. So I think for our idea is to mold people in such a way that they are able to now figure out as they go along. Coming back to the issue of the transition and changes, I look at everything that has happened as an opportunity rather than a challenge. During the pandemic, I worked 18 hours. I remember that, I think I tried to paraphrase, I always look at my life, and I remember my wife was so busy worried about death, and she's more religious than I am, because I believe in God in spirit, but I don't every day go to church. I'm not saying going to church is a bad thing. And she's the one who follows religion to the letter. And I always feel that maybe it's the disconnect, because I feel that I always believe that God decides when you have to go, whether you are born, you died 5 years, or still born 50, 100, whatever it is. And in that respect, I leave everything else to God. I leave the trust to him. But I think the rest I do is that I have to keep doing what I believe I should do. So during the pandemic, I saw it as an opportunity that a lot of people will be so scared. They will be worried about death and how to protect and everything. I just knew that I just have to put in the hours, really work so many hours. And we scaled our business by tenfold by really driving our team and showing them the way. So I think that sometimes what we see in Africa, sometimes people come to Africa and say, we don't have this, we don't have that. And sometimes we look at ourselves like we put ourselves in a sorry state, but rather than putting ourselves in a state of opportunity. Having nothing means it's an opportunity to add. But if you have it, then it's a challenge. What do you need to improve? So for us in Africa, everything we don't have is an opportunity. So I look at the pandemic as an opportunity. Maybe it became an opportunity, first of all, that we have to build hospitals across our continent, better hospitals. because when it was a pandemic, even the rich man couldn't fly out. It also meant we now need to build pharmaceutical plants, which is an opportunity now that we have to think long-term. We shouldn't wait until the next pandemic, that we should train our best people to be on our continent. So if you look at it, you can turn the whole thing around and say, God, it's an opportunity for us to do even things we used to go to India. Now we have to do it at home. It means we improve our hospital in South Africa. The other opportunity I see this climate thing. We have so much land. Maybe how can we now, Africa's land and water, how can we become now the breadbasket of the world with better methods of farming than what other people who have not major land and all those things? We can provide energy, solar energy. Some of the countries that are on the equator and the Sahara, they could provide energy to most of the world. So we have to, it's a clarion call for us to think more innovatively than victims. I think there's a kind of notion that we've been made to feel we are victims. I think we're not victims. We just want to be victims. So I don't know. So the LéO Africa is to prepare our people to be ready, steady, and always ready to fire, so that every opportunity that comes, they grab it, they feel confident, they can stride on the world, on the continent, and lead themselves. I think the whole concept is great. We don't have to change anything. We just have to enhance. We have to always, of course, adapt. But I think the idea of preparing men and women for the future, I don't think it changes regardless of what's around you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, just to switch really quickly to the theme, investing in bold African ideas, how the story of LéO Africa Institute can inspire action. I'm curious, how would you define a bold African idea, Magnus? What's your definition?
Okay, for me, I love the word bold. I mean, I sometimes, I call them the management. If you're, I argue a lot with my friends in the consulting world, this management consulting world. They always come up with big things. Let me tell you, the other day we were talking this day. It was great to be at IMD. Meeting great minds and trying to figure out how the world is shaping up. And I recalled. When in 2010 we had a transition at Ericsson, we brought in these boys from McKinsey. They come up with a big idea. It was like, God, the words are so big on paper. They sounded like, God, we're in space. And then they dumped them on the desk and said, guys, Ericsson needs to take these new steps. And I remember our new CEO stood on stage, got all of us excited, thinking, God, it's a new dawn, And then we realized we had to go back inside the organization, and it's like you have an old car, and then someone comes and paints it, looks so nice and bright. But when you get inside the car to drive it, you find the car is not driving the way you want. So I feel that when people talk about bold, I've come to realize that great success, there's a new book I'm reading, that small changes are much better than big changes. So I prefer that bold comes from doing everyday small changes. But these small changes eventually become big changes, because so many small changes really lead to big changes. So I haven't seen anything that is massive that happens overnight and then it succeeds. It always rises up and then shoots down. I think when we talk about bold, is that we have to continuously every day do small changes. And then through those small changes, a big plan will come out. So that's how I would define bold. And I'm a big believer that every day I do minor changes in my life. I twist here, I twist there, I turn there, I dial here, I dial here, I dial here. The best with watches, you always small dial. You twist it slowly. If you start to make the watches and they make the dial, it just twists more, the very tiny thing, they change and turn until a beautiful thing happens. Yeah. So I believe that bold means that we need to take every day small, nice little steps and tuning, and then something big will come out. That's how
Start small, make small changes. That's brilliant. Now, Magnus, there's, brilliant young and emerging leaders on this call who are burning away with, bold ideas and bold business, ideas to, change the face of the continent, make a contribution to create the Africa we want. You yourself are, a pioneer of sorts, not only in the corporate space, but now what you're doing with the Kwanzaa Group, I'm sure it's not something you've done by yourself. You've had to get investors on board or spend your own money or go to the bank. And so, you know, I'm curious, and I'm sure they're curious to know, based from your experience, you know, they have these bold ideas. How can they take them from ideation to reality? And I guess more importantly, what steps can they take to make sure that the ideas are investable, that when someone looks at these bold ideas, they think, okay, I want to be a part of that?
Yeah. So, and recently, I've had a lot of reflection, because now I've got young kids. I've got a 25-year-old and 26-year-old. And I've got an extremely brilliant young lady. My daughter is extremely brilliant, very smart, works very hard and everything. And so I'd like to use my daughter as an example. So maybe that will enrich the experience here. Is that I've come to realize, no matter how smart you are, first of all, the three things I've found as a successful factor. You need very good knowledge in the area that you want to be investing in. And when I mean that, you know, like today, I don't invest in things that I don't have any knowledge in, because you pay a very high price, because you might think you know, but then you find a lot of things you don't know. The other one I found is very, very important, and it's when you listen and pay attention in the VC world, they say you should always have a co-founder. The reason you have a co-founder is that, and the co-founder, if you're very good in technology, then you need a good man in sales and management and finance, somebody who now looks at the box. You know, so you need to find a balance that you always are two rather than one. And I think even the world in the investment community, they always ask, who's your co-founder? Because if you're the only one, you could make the bad decision. There's no one to check your bad decision or to question you. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And that's why, and also when you look for a co-founder, find someone that you're not just only going to spend time fighting, but someone who complements you. And, you know, you look at my weakness, my strength, and then the guy who comes in brings in that kind of a balance on the other side. It's like when you sit on the balance, on a scale, that the other side balance the other side. And then the third one that I've found is look for people with wisdom and knowledge. We've done it. Who can be your sounding board, because then they can question your thinking. And I always ask people one question: do you see, if you listen to the story, can you see money? Can you really make money out of it? You know, don't, you know, before you do the Excel sheet, can you really, if you run the numbers, what is it, what are you trying to solve? Your idea must solve a unique problem. And what is that problem? Is it big enough? Can it scale? Because sometimes we have great ideas that are nice, but they don't have any utility. This morning when I was running, I love my podcast. I was reflecting on when Amazon came up with the Echo, you know, what do you call it? You know, the thing that you talk to and then comes back. So I thought,
the home device, yes.
The home device. I was one of those fascination. I love technology, everything that comes out right. So I bought it, and then I'll ask Alexa, Lala, it talks back, Alexa. And I got bored. I said, fuck, how do I ask this shit every time, you know? So yesterday, Alexa, the $10 billion down the drain, and the people, only thing they do is tell Alexa, please set the clock. Alexa, remind me tomorrow, I'll play music, and that's it. So there's not been any major utility of greater value or create great value. So I think that Alexa down the road is just gonna die. They'll write off the books, boom, and die. So I don't think they thought a lot. How will the people, what would be the benefits in community, and what would that be? And so far, so they've not been able to create value. So it's very important, therefore, whatever you do, to say, okay, what real human need am I solving? Because if you don't solve any human need and on scale, because if it's not scalable, it means you're not going to grow your revenues and you're going to just struggle. Yeah. And the other thing I always tell people, that do an Excel sheet, even if you don't know, okay, what is the revenue? Make your assumption. What is it? What are my assumptions of how am I going to make money? Even if you're not right, but at least you have a chance to go back and see when you start running the business, to compare your assumptions, what is working in your assumptions, what's not working, what you need to modify, because at least you have got an idea. And one other thing I like of Jeff Bezos, he always says that if it's a great idea, write about 6 pages of what exactly you're trying to do. Write it down, write it down so that you can read it and let's make sense. And then give people, say, okay, does my idea make sense? Because sometimes when we talk, we can explain, but we do PowerPoints. PowerPoint don't really explain anything. It looks nice. But when you can write pages of what you're trying to do, it really shows that you have made a great, you know. And then after that, you know, I started most of my business without really asking for funding. Yeah. My business is really about subscription and at the end of the day, so the whole idea was, do I have the right environment and can I monetize? So I think I leverage a lot on, I can say my success today is not because of, I could raise money. My success today is because I knew which industry I'm playing in and how to get there. And recently, you know, sometimes you do discover as you age. I'm now 52, so I was reading recently that the most successful part of people's, you know, those who succeed in business, they succeed from the age of 50. I thought, wow, that sounds very strange. And so they say, look at all the major successful businessmen, they succeed between, I'd say from 45 up, then they become successful. And then I reflected on it. The reason that is correct is that by the time you reach 45, you already have enough experience. You've already done mistakes. You already know what you're good at, what you don't know, what you know. And where in the word in economics, they say that dig where you stand, meaning that you start where you have the best knowledge. You can't just start where you don't have the best knowledge. So by the time you are 45, 50, you already have tremendous amount of knowledge that you are able to now know what to do. You don't just do things by emotion, but you do. But there's always the outliers, the young ones. There's Zuckerberg who come up with great ideas. They catch a wave, but those are very few and far. But if you are one of those, like you look at Zuckerberg and the Google boys, they also knew that they did not have management experience. That's why they brought in the big boys. You know, Melissa and the other lady, you know, Lynn Ford, I forgot her name, or Lynn. She helped him to manage because she had managed from Google. She had experience. Google brought in Schmidt, who then mentored them until they became ready to take over. And when they also learned, they gave it somebody else to take over. So you have to know what you don't know. I always say that one thing that makes us not aware is not know what we don't know. And sometimes we overcompensate, we overbelieve. So I think you need to be rational, that you know something and some things you don't know. And what you don't know is what you look for. I don't know if I've answered.
There you have it, YELP. There you have it, YELP. Some really good tips. You have to know what you don't know, dig where you stand, write it down, find someone who's done it. Lots of useful tips to draw from. Now, Magnus, why is this the right time to invest in African ideas?
Okay, let me speak from my perspective. I always say that, first of all, we Africans have to build our Africa. You know, we are the only people on earth that believe someone else is going to come and build this continent, which is it's a false dream, and I think it's stupid. I don't know who has ever come to your farm and planted the food for you, and then you can harvest it afterwards. You know, so I've not seen it, so I don't believe that somebody's going to come and do that. But I say, and this I talk to a lot of the leadership in Africa when I have an opportunity to speak to them, that the biggest opportunity today in Africa, and I'll come to your question, is that the combination of the cloud, the internet, and the mobile networks has really enabled African children to normalize and compete at the same level as any children in the world. Because if you build a solution today, you can sell it to the globe. 20, 30 years ago, even you couldn't sell it to your village because nobody knew who you were. Today, the whole world, once you have something great, you put it on the internet, everybody knows who you are. You can go on YouTube and tell people your story, everyone knows what you're trying to do. So we have an opportunity today to transform our Africa. Secondly, the area that is doing extremely well, and it's a kind of a forerunner, and I'm sure a lot of things will come, is the fintech world, where you see for the first time in Africa, people are investing in African companies with great ideas solving human nature. And payments is the starting of commerce, you know, the moving of money. if you can move money freely, smoothly, quickly, at a lower cost, frictionless, I think it enables commerce to then advance, because then people can move quickly. And I think with, if you see Flutterwave, Paga, mobile monies from Safaricom, M-Pesa, mobile money from MTN, Airtel, and the rest, you start seeing that an ecosystem is building up, enabling those who have not been banked for a long time now to come into the mainstream economy. And then there's a lot of money flowing in directly to these companies, not going to the government, and then the government thinking who's going to get it, and if it's political or not political, or you are my party, not party. So they already, it's first time we're moving away from getting grants and loans and what do you call it? Because one of my friends said to me, it runs about $100 billion private equity in New York. He said, to raise money for Africa, if you say you want to raise money for Africa, nobody's interested. If you want to say you want to give money for charity, everyone wants to give money for charity, because they want to keep us begging, you know. And so we need to move away from begging to become real. So that is the transformation that we need. So investing in Africa, I believe in these young, bold men and women you mentioned, that they need to believe in their concept, but they must test their ideas, because I really think that Africa will be, we need more young people to not, we need to train them to invest rather than to be employed. There's not employment, we don't have employment in Africa. They're not factories. So they need to create the employment for other people. So we need more business people in Africa than we do need. Otherwise, you want to address the issue of the triple bottom line. You want to address the issue of unemployment and all the problems that we associate with people having nothing to do, poverty, disease, and all that. So we have to invest in Africa. So we need to create companies that will now suck all these people into these industries. And we are ripe for, and the other thing we need to be happy about as a continent, I was looking at Tanzania population. So Tanzania population has moved to 61 million. We added 20 million people in 10 years. So I'm thinking that in the next 10 years, if we double again, we're almost close to 100 million. So it means by 2040, 2050, Tanzania will be 100 million people. So the question is, you can look at it in two ways. Is it the, you know, if you look at the Gaussian curve, is it a bad bulge or a good bulge? You know, so those are things we need to look at and say, what does it mean for Africa? Is it an opportunity or a curse? So if I was Tanzania, I say, God, we're going to produce so many young people to do work. And if you look at the world economy grew at a faster pace when there were a lot of young people. The world was not old. Now the world is aging. Despite computers, robotics, and everything, the economy of the world is not growing at such a pace, because you'd have fault efficiency, because you need consumption, you need people, and people have to work, and then from work they earn, and then they buy all these goods and services. So Africa, by 2050, will be almost 2.5 billion people. I think will be the biggest continent or population in the world. So then imagine that population if we could harness it correctly. So if I was today in my 20s, I'll say, God, I'll be 40 years by that time. Imagine addressing 2.5 billion people. So I think the opportunity, for me, I think it's just astounding. And I think Africa will create so many billionaires in the next 20 years. We will be amazed. But we need clever billionaires, not the ones who are raping the rest of the continent.
You know, you said something that really stuck out, Magnus, which is that Africa, we Africans have to build Africa. And we need young people who are investing and not so much looking for jobs. Not to say looking for a job is bad, but we're going to have 2.5 billion Africans. And I wonder, you know, from your perspective, you know, charity begins at home. Where do we begin? I mean, LéO Africa Institute is one step. You know, we're building a network of young Africans, you know, and they're all coming up with these ideas. So everyone must have an idea. But is it the education system we need to change? Where do we start to change this sort of mindset? I
have to say there are a lot of people who are doing a lot of things for Africa. My friend Fred Swaneker is done very well with the Africa Leadership Institute and creating bold leaders and giving the people tools. And I think the biggest, what we in Africa haven't learned from developed economies is that government can't create policies in isolation of the industries and so I like what President Ruto said, is that we can't have universities just having professors who just teach people stupid things. You know, there are certain things, today I became a leader of Africa, I'll go to university and say, that curriculum, scrap it, and maybe leave 2 things and say, teach people only do this thing. 1, teach them how to do agriculture, economics, and financing, you know, and then maybe teach them technology like medicine, how to create medicine, how to build a robot, you know, things that really going to make Africa great. You know, you teach people things that have no effective in Africa. I mean, people come out carrying stupid papers saying I've got a degree, and you ask them, so what can you do with a degree? Nothing. So those are not degrees, those are just waste of time. So, but then, so you need a transformation at the universities, meaning that the government must worry, what are we producing? It cannot just be the government does its own thing, the business community does its own thing, the university just teaches whatever the British left or the French or the Germans, that's it, when everyone else has moved away from that. So I think we need a new conversation which say that, what is the university teaching? Is it relevant for our economies? No, scrap it. Yeah, maybe the books, how old are the books? Maybe they are 30, 40 years old. We don't need those things. I mean, you know, most African people know the history of German and Russia and whatever. Nobody even knows the history of their own country. And then you're told that you're going to be developed. How can you develop people who don't even know about their own history, know the history of what the Germans did, what the British did? It's like they're teaching you how to remain trapped in your mind. So we have to get away from all these things. So when I worked in Europe, we worked with universities. We would go and explain to universities what we want. I was at Harvard pitching what Ericsson did. We did competition. I was at Boston University, at Wharton, at Columbia, all over the world. And we explained what we wanted. And the professors were already working with us and locked in. So they knew what we were doing. They were there working with us. So the curriculum was aligned to what we are trying to achieve. Not in Africa. Africa, I don't think I've ever had any professor sitting with a corporate and say, this is what we're teaching. Is it relevant for your company? So the issue is, are we aligning up our education to be relevant to what the marketplace is? And that's unfortunately we're not.
I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, maybe my question was a little biased, but I know we need to get you out of here in less than 25 minutes because you're heading to the airport. So maybe I'll ask you 1 or 2 more questions. I don't know if someone from the moderation team can just put in the chat. Am I allowed to open it up for like 1 or 2 questions? But I will ask my next question whilst you let me know whether we can. So, you know, you've spoken about education and turning that on its head. You've worked across Africa, you're working across various African markets. What 3 bold actions can the public and private sector take today in order to create an enabling environment for these bold African ideas to thrive? I mean, you've touched on education, but you know, maybe 2.
I think that what God did not endow us as Black people, at least on our continent, is decisive decision making, and I think we're good at politics, you know, for doing nothing. I'll give you an example, and please, I wanted to remain with you. You know, I was very happy with the new dawn in Zambia. You know, I supply also fertilizer in Zambia. So I work with one of the biggest fertilizer company in the world. So we were invited, we've done so much for the country of Zambia. And then they set the process, how the process will unfold, who's going to be appointed or not. And we went through the whole entire process. And then eventually said, no, they need to reward the cadres and the politicians. Then they unravel the whole policy. And it's a 1-year process. And then at the end, the system got screwed. The farmers have yet to get their inputs. It's now a political ballpoint. And so you really wonder, who could have made one big decision for the people of the country rather than just rewarding friends? So what I find, and if I can tell you, Africa needs 100 Kagames. You know, you might not agree everything it does, but you need a guy who says, hey, we're gonna just do it. I don't want this bullshit, screw you, let's go on. And we have too many, you know, these fuzzy characteristics, so we've got this indecisive leadership. So I'm hoping President Ruto will keep cutting through the red tape and standing up and say, if we can just, only thing we need is decision making. If we make decisions that are really in the interest of our people, everything else will happen. Africans can take care of themselves, but they need clear direction and guidance. And that comes from decision making. So I don't think there's not many things, we need to make real proper decision. We need to depoliticize our decision process. We need to think first for our people, what would be good for our people? And then we make a decision. And then you can grow. But if you say, well, this is going to be a good decision, is good for my friend in my pocket, then you're lost, So Africa needs good decisions. We don't need anything else.
All right, thanks, Magnus. I couldn't agree more with the 100 Kagames across Africa. So now I'm going to open it up, if that's okay, for 1 or 2 questions. So if you could please raise your hand and ask the question, or put it in the chats, whichever works. I think raise your hand. I can't seem to see my chat. Oh, okay. I see Amir. Is that Amir? Amir, do you want to ask the question? No? Okay. I'm just trying to quickly go to my chat. Well, I have a question. I'm sorry, I can't seem to see the chats with the rest of the group. But maybe in ending, Magnus, we've talked about this, that even though the environment is changing, the need to always train young people to lead from a value-based position will never change. That is going to stay constant. I'm curious, and having spoken to the fact that, once you hit over 50, then you know what you know. As a leader, what 3 values do you live by?
Yeah, I mean, and I think maybe it's good to talk about transitions. Life is a transition, and I think sometimes when we codify this value thing, sometimes it can be lost in trying to the Puritan, and I think first of all I start off saying that the first value, I know I'm not perfect, that I make these mistakes, and I think that that people making mistakes, it's great to make mistakes because you learn from them. I think we have seen that the best time you learn is when you're down rather than when you're up. When you're doing so well, you never really learn anything because you think you're a hero. Only when you fall down can you. So for me, making mistakes is really important and you should really be in the habit of falling and standing up. And I don't mean, and when we talk about this, we try and inculcate the value that you shouldn't do something that really damages you. But failure is a very important part of learning. So I think I like to talk about failure. But the one value that I've really come to see that I think it should be something you should do if you're young early on is live a healthy life, healthy life. And I remember my doctor, who was just recently retired, when I went for my detox, he said to me that, Magnus, in $1 million, there's 1 and then there's 6 zeros. Yeah. And he said, 1 represent health, 0 represent maybe your children, your family, your friends, all the zeros, your investment, everything you do. So first he said, but when 1 drops, everything else drops. So he said, if 1 drops, all the zeros with bank accounts, family, houses, all drops away. So, and then I learned that it's very important to invest a lot in your health, because that's what enables you to think and to do great. So I think if you could, and that value, it's important to even start it early, not late, that your health is so important to everything else as a value than anything else. Then I think the other value that I've really come to know that focus and diligence and honesty, because you need to be focused on what you want to do. You need to really put in the requisite work. Nothing comes from freedom, and your word must mean something. You can't just tell people stories. You can't just be everything to everybody. You have to be decisive, but you have to be honest about what you say, and you really have, and also keeping a close knit of a cycle of friends. Don't have, you know, if I look at today, I have very limited friends. And there's what I call friends, and I call acquaintances, and I call business partners. Your cycle of friends, your trusted friends must be very narrow, because you want to make sure the conversations you have are extremely valuable, and they go deep, and you can emotionalize. And I think what we don't do a lot as young people, particularly men, well, I think women do a better job of it. We don't want to be vulnerable, but being vulnerable is a very great value, because it enables people to understand you. Your honesty comes from being vulnerable and emotional. Your trust comes from being vulnerable and emotional. So we need to learn to be vulnerable. We shouldn't create this macho belief that men are strong, they don't crack. I think it's okay to cry or tear once in a while if you feel like you need to show that you are affected. Show affection and love. So, but it all comes from having a healthy mind, and everything else follows. So nowadays, and yesterday, one of the things that we did in this program, just to sum it up, we came here, we were the case study. Normally, when you go to institute like the IMD, or if you go to Harvard, you read case studies and then try and interpret the case studies, and then figure out how to put them into your normal work. So this week, we learned about the characteristics of what they call, the secure base leadership. What is your secure base? Who are the people? Because your values stem from something. Is it your grandmother, your mother, your parents, your brothers? Because there's a community that is your anchor. And so it's very important to look at that. We spoke about grief. And one thing that I've really took out is that you can only move forward if you are able to let go of grief. So how did one of the final story I would like to tell was an Irishman who, at the age of 10, he was playing in a football ground, and then a British soldier shot him in the eyes, and he became blind at the age of 10. And then he loved soccer and all that. And then one of the brothers took him out and explained to him that, Richard, you will never see again. You'll be blind for life. And that night, Richard went to his room and cried, and he couldn't see again. And then his mother, thinking that because, when you're blind, nobody knows whether you're awake or asleep, would come in his room and cry and tell God, why is my son, can you, and pray every day for the son to see. So fast forward, Richard today, you say that he doesn't feel is a disabled person. And then, when you ask him why, he said, I'm not disabled. He said that of everything, he has still his sense of touch, smell, feeling, he can walk. So he said that not being, because he's blind, it doesn't lose anything. He said even it's much more advanced, it is lived a more quality of life than being blind than if he wasn't. And today he runs foundations around the world. He has foundation in Uganda, in Tanzania, and other places as a blind. He's a friend of the Dalai Lama, and he spoke about forgiveness. He said that you need first to forgive yourself before you can forgive others. You have to free yourself from the grief. And if you don't let grief go, and sometimes we all have grief of some sort in our lives, So he said, if you don't let grief go, it means you can't live a full life. You have something limiting your development. And so he spoke about, and then eventually he met a soldier who shot him after 33 years. And they spoke, and he realized, and this was a very important thing that he said. He said he realized that the soldier who shot him wasn't the problem. Sometimes you separate the action from the person. He was just doing his job. Maybe he made a mistake, but he wasn't there because he was part of a system. He was there, but he wasn't deliberately looking to shoot this young man. So he was able to separate the man from the action. And from there, they're now they're wonderful friends. And the only time he said he feels he hates being blind is when he got married. He couldn't see his wife. So he doesn't know how the wife looks like, but he has a sense of how she feels and does. And then when he had his kids born, he was in the delivery room. He never saw those kids, but he felt them. And then when his daughters got married, he has 2 daughters, and he gave them away, but he never knew how they looked. It could only be explained. But beyond that, he has never missed being, he has never missed seeing. He doesn't miss not seeing. So one of those leadership is that sometimes we find we hold things in our hearts that we should let go so we can live a full life of happiness and joy. So I'd hope that the young people, if there's something holding you back, that you have not been able to let go, it really manifests into a bad value if you don't learn to, let bygones be bygones, so you can clean up your closet and live a happy life. Thank you.
Magnus, thank you. Very quickly before I close this, we've got two comments I've seen that I'd like to read for you. One says, this is from Diana. She says, thank you, Magnus. Great point on distinctions in the members of our community, our networks, and our personal ecosystems. And yes, the men need to know that they can cry. The humanness transcends genders. And one other comment here from Jacob. Technology is your friend until it's not your friend. Okay, this is from Jacob. He says, Mr. Magnus makes a good submission on putting ourselves in a state of opportunity rather than the self-defeat state or wannabe victim state. So Magnus clearly touching many of our fellows here today. I want to thank you for taking the time. Honestly, it's been an enriching conversation from our end, and you really spoke from the heart. So thank you for being an example of a vulnerable male leader. We really appreciate it, sharing, from your experiences and from your heart, and speaking your truth. Thank you once again. And I personally look forward to meeting you here in Zambia or South Africa. Hope our paths cross, and wishing you all the best and safe flight.
Yeah, thank you very much. So maybe just to wrap off, number one, first of all, I think I'll be in Zambia next week. So I need to come and wrap up one of the final trip of the year with a few meetings. So hopefully, if you do share your email and number, I think you shared with me, then we will touch base. And secondly, I wanted to wrap up by, first of all, acknowledging the work that OL has done to marshal us all, to marshal the whole entire LéO Institute from inception to making it a fantastic organization. I'm very proud. I can tell you that I never imagined that 10 years we'll be still talking and now even think about how we're going to take it to the next level. So first of all, that shows resilience. In life, we need to be resilient. And all will tell you, nothing is easy to build. So it takes resilience, focus, determination, and never giving up. And even when you're down, you figure out how to stand up. So I'm extremely proud of the work and this team have really put together to continue giving the platform to the young people of Africa. The other one I want to say is that I was truly hoping that the 10-year anniversary and when we had a call, I think it was in August, I truly hoped that we would not have to entangle the 2 times, but I hope that in the new year, Owen and I will set a beautiful time and find out. Maybe I'll come to Uganda and meet some of the attendees. But I'd love to meet some of the young fellows. We'll work out something. But I truly want to wish all the young men and women that have been with us for the last 10 years, maybe, just to be great to have like a story about where they are today, how they've continued to develop, and what is it they see in their lives. And then finally, I would like to to wish the ones that are graduating to all the best, that the world is just a very beautiful platform to do great things. You just have to dream. Don't believe that you need, sometimes when I talk to a lot of young men, they say that they need money to begin something. You don't need money, you need great ideas and great focus, and really think about what is it you're trying to solve. Then the money just comes if you have a great idea. But if you have no great idea, if you chase money to invest, then you never get anything done. So with that said, I want to wish you all continuous and great deliberations and a wonderful one morning and afternoon. And I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Magnus. And to our fellows who are joining us and everyone joining us via the call, we've come to the end of session 3. In terms of next steps, we will now be proceeding into lunch, I believe. And that lunch will go on until 2:30 when the next session will begin, which is on the future of the Young and Emerging Leaders Project. And that will